A very good afternoon and welcome to the midday news on Rajya Sabha television, where we get you the biggest developing news stories at the top of one. I'm Ashwarya and here are the headlines. Prime Minister Modi discusses security issues with US Defence Secretary Jim Mattis in Singapore. Concludes a 5-day, 3-nation tour with a visit to Changi Naval Base. Sushma Swaraj leaves for South Africa for Foreign Ministers' BRICS meeting to take part also in the India, Brazil and South Africa Dialogue Forum. Sushma's visit ahead of Prime Minister Modi's participation in the BRICS summit in Johannesburg in July. After Supreme Court's 16th of February order, Centre constitutes Kaveri Water Management Authority to address water sharing between Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala and Puducherry. Tamil Nadu welcomes move. Heavy rainfall and lightning leaves 9 dead in West Bengal, 15 lives lost in UP due to thunderstorm, even as temperature in Churu in Rajasthan touches 50 degrees Celsius. And a week after calling off summit, US President Donald Trump says 12th of June talks with Kim Jong-un in Singapore are back on track. Announcement comes after White House receives Kim's letter hand-delivered by North Korea's top envoy. Our top story this afternoon, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is leaving for India after concluding his 5-day, 3-nation tour to Indonesia, Malaysia and Singapore. On day 3 of his visit in Singapore, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had a busy schedule. He began the day by meeting former Prime Minister of Singapore, Goh Chok Tong. And from here, Prime Minister Modi went to Clifford Pier, where he unveiled a plaque to commemorate the immersion of Mahatma Gandhi's ashes in the country's waters. In 1948, Mahatma Gandhi's ashes had been sent to various parts of India and the world, including Singapore. The Prime Minister then visited the National Orchid Garden located within the Singapore Botanical Gardens. Singapore also named an orchid as a Debronium Narendra Modi to mark his visit. Later, Prime Minister Modi also visited the Sri Mariamman temple, which is the oldest Hindu temple, and the Buddhist Tooth Relic temple and museum. The Prime Minister also visited Chulia Mosque, which is one of the oldest mosques of Singapore. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi also met with US Defence Secretary Jim Mattis in Singapore today. Prime Minister Modi held a closed-door meeting with Mattis, during which both the sides discussed all security-related issues of mutual and global interest. The meeting with Mattis comes days after the Pentagon renamed its Pacific Command as the Indo-Pacific Command in a largely symbolic move to signal India's importance to the US military. The meeting was held on the sidelines of the annual Shangri-La Dialogue, which was addressed by the Prime Minister last night. In his keynote address at the dialogue, Prime Minister Modi had said that an Asia of rivalry will hold the region back, while an Asia of cooperation will shape the current century. And the Prime Minister also visited the Indian Heritage Centre in Little India district in Singapore. He received a rousing welcome as he visited the centre. The Prime Minister also unveiled the Kala Sangam, a permanent platform established by the Indian High Commission in Singapore and the Indian Heritage Centre to bring Indian artisans to the country. The centre showcases Indian heritage and its rich cultural diversity. Lastly, Prime Minister Modi also met the officers and the sailors of the Indian naval ship, which in the Changi Naval Base. The Prime Minister reached Singapore on Thursday on the last leg of his 3-nation tour to the Southeast Asian countries. And addressing the naval officers, Prime Minister Modi lauded their efforts.
ऐसा क्षेत्र है कि हर हिंदुस्तानी गर्व करता है कि वो यूनिफॉर्म की कल्पना मात्र करता है तो उसके मन में एक बहुत ही आदर भाव रहता है और ये अचानक नहीं हुआ। जितनी पीढ़ियां इस यूनिफॉर्म के साथ जिंदगी गुजारते हुए निकली, उस व्यवस्था में है तब, और व्यवस्था से बाहर जाने के बाद उन्होंने जीवन में जिस डिसिप्लिन को फॉलो किया, जिस मर्यादाओं का, संयम का, नियमों का पालन किया, उसको हिंदुस्तान का हर नागरिक बहुत बारीकी से देखता है।
All right, my colleague Akhilesh Suman is now joining us live from the newsroom. Akhilesh, Prime Minister Modi is going to depart from Singapore in a short while from now. He's concluding his 5-day, 3-nation tour. How do you look at this entire visit, 5-day visit of Prime Minister Modi?
Yes, it's a really interesting visit to know that, and one of the most assertive visits, I will say, that he began from Indonesia and then he went to Malaysia and then he went to Singapore. You know that a strategic component in Indonesia was huge because Indonesia is the gateway of Malacca Strait, and in Indonesia we signed an agreement to connect Aceh with Andaman Nicobar, and you know that this is a very strategic lane where ships will pass, and even from the South China Sea, ships will come through this way only. So it is very important agreement between Indonesia and India, and you know that once after finishing his journey to Indonesia, he came to Malaysia, and Malaysia, you know that there is a lot of cooperation on the issue of radicalization. In India and Malaysia had been working against radicalization for long, and now when the President Mahathir Mohamad has taken oath and he is the new president, very old and very experienced gentleman, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also created a rapport with him, and after that he came to Singapore, and you know that Singapore we signed an agreement between India and Singapore about logistical cooperation. Yes. And this logistical cooperation will include everything, right from aircraft from the marine areas, also cooperation in high sea, and also using each other's ports in a strategic way, in a way that you can say that you can fly, you can depart from there, you can put the park there, so everything else. So it is one of the major, you know, agreements between India and Singapore. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi, when he spoke in Shangri-La Dialogue yesterday, he made it very clear that India is going to stay here, and he said that we will deepen our ties with ASEAN nations, and we will also be increasing our presence here. So when people were thinking that after informal summit between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping, this is a new situation that India is also trying to be realistic and show realistic that it doesn't mean that we are withdrawing from any influence zone. We are being there, and this is how power balance will be created in Asia. So I think in that way, ASEAN nations are also now believing more than earlier when we shifted from lookists to activists, and from now you know that all ASEAN nations are seeing us very importantly and very curiously that how India is going to increase its presence, and the two agreements that I told you with Indonesia and Singapore are landmark, and this will increase their confidence in India, you know, Aishwarya.
Absolutely. So Prime Minister Modi there, he's going to conclude his 3-nation 5-day tour today. And this is obviously a big boost to India's Act East policy. Thank you so much, Akhilesh, for those updates on that story. And on to some other news now. External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj today embarked on a 5-day visit to South Africa to attend the BRICS and IBSA ministerial meetings. During the visit, Sushma Swaraj is expected to have meetings with the top leadership of South Africa. The External Affairs Minister will also participate in the BRICS Foreign Ministers meeting on 4th of June, and she will chair the IBSA Foreign Ministers meeting. On 6th of June, she will visit the Phoenix Settlement, a South African heritage site, a place where Mahatma Gandhi developed his philosophy of non-violence. She would also participate in a series of events on 6th and 7th of June. Sushma's visit comes ahead of Prime Minister Modi's participation in the BRICS summit, which is going to be held in Johannesburg in the month of July. And in the midday news, we'll take a very short break. We'll be back with more news. Welcome back after the break. The BJP will field its candidate for the post of Rajya Sabha Deputy Chairman. This was confirmed by Petroleum Minister Dharmendra Pradhan, who also said that the party favours a consensus on the candidate's name and is open to seek a cooperation from the Congress as well if required. The term of a present Deputy Chairman, P.J. Kurian, is expiring this month, and the election to the post would be held in the ensuing monsoon session of Parliament. And Union Minister Jitendra Singh has said that terrorism in the Kashmir Valley is in its last stage. Hailing Prime Minister Modi's government's decisive actions on anti-terrorism front, Singh said that 600 militants have been killed since 2014, which is much higher than the number of militants killed during the previous UPA governments. Singh said that Pakistan has suffered due to the decisive action by India, and that the other countries have also begun to hear, respond and support India in its actions against cross-border terrorism. Reaffirming the centre's commitment to pay special attention to Jammu and Kashmir, Singh also said that the government has been trying to resolve issues with Pakistan, both at the diplomatic and military levels.
One thing is very clear that in the last 2-3 years, the kind of decisive action, even as far as the detention on the borders is concerned, has not happened in several decades. And even the people living in the border areas bear that out. But be rest assured, there is going to be no compromise as far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned. Certain things may not be said, they would only be done. And once it happens, it will be known to everybody.
Meanwhile, Defence Minister Nirmala Sitharaman met with Home Minister Rajnath Singh on Friday to discuss the security situation in Jammu and Kashmir. Both the leaders reviewed the ongoing suspension of operations against the militants, which was announced by the central government during the period of Ramadan. And on to the other top story. The centre has constituted the Kaveri Water Management Authority, or the CMA, to address the dispute over sharing of river water among Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala and Puducherry. On 16th of February, the Supreme Court had directed the government to form the CMA within 6 weeks. Now the authority would comprise of a chairman, 8 members besides a secretary. And out of the 8 members, 2 each will be full-time and part-time members, while the rest 4 would be part-time members from states. The centre will initially contribute a sum of 2 crore rupees for the functioning of the authority. Meanwhile, the Tamil Nadu government has welcomed the constitution of CMA, hailing it as a grand victory for the Amma government and the state's farmers. Effective from Friday, India's largest bank, the State Bank of India, increased its marginal cost of funds-based lending rate, or the MCLR, by 10 basis points. The hike, announced 5 days before the RBI's monetary policy review, means that housing and personal loan rates will get costlier for consumers. Now, MCLR is the minimum rate below which the commercial banks cannot lend to its customers. While SBI has increased the lending rates by 10 basis points across all tenors up to 3 years, the Punjab National Bank raised the MCLR for 3 years and 5-year tenors to 8.55% and 8.7%. And private sector bank ICICI Bank also raised its 1-year MCLR to 8.4% from Friday. News from the Northeast, and President Ramnath Kovind has given his assent to an ordinance to set up the country's first national sports university in Manipur. The Union Cabinet had approved an ordinance on 23rd of the last month in this regard. The National Sports University Ordinance 2018 will be on the lines of the National Sports University Bill 2017, which was introduced in Lok Sabha last year. This university will be a first of its kind to promote sports education in the areas of sports sciences, sports technology, sports management, among others. The proposal was formally announced by the Finance Minister in his budget speech of 2014-15. On to some weather news now. At least 15 people are reported to be dead and 9 others have been injured after a thunderstorm hit several districts of Uttar Pradesh yesterday. A similar situation prevailed across West Bengal as 9 people died due to heavy rainfall and lightning there. Bringing some respite from sizzling heat, rains lashed several parts of North India, bringing the temperatures down in Delhi, Uttarakhand, Haryana, Chandigarh and other places. A dust storm hit Delhi last night, bringing the maximum temperature down from 42 degrees Celsius to 35 degrees Celsius. The IMD has forecast another dust storm in the day today. Meanwhile, southwest monsoon continues to further advance in various parts of the south of the country. As per the Met Department, conditions are favourable for the further advancement of monsoon in northeast India as well as in Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu for the next 3 days. Meanwhile, Rajasthan continues to reel under sweltering heat with the temperature in Churu recorded at 49.7 degrees Celsius on Friday. Met officials say that the heat wave conditions are likely to continue in Rajasthan as well in Madhya Pradesh over the next few days. And now let's take a look at all the weather updates from across the country. Let's get you some more national news in Nationwide. Mobile internet services were suspended in Kashmir's Srinagar and Budgam districts today as a precautionary measure. This after a youth who was run over by a CRPF vehicle during a protest in the Nohata area on Friday succumbed to his injuries today. The separatists have also called for a day-long strike across Kashmir today to protest against the recent civilian killings. Price for petrol and diesel were cut by 9 paise per litre today. In the national capital, petrol now costs 78.2 rupees a litre and the diesel costs 69.11 paise per litre. This is the 4th reduction following the 16 days of continuous price hikes. The reductions follow the softening of international oil rates and the rupee gaining against the US dollar. 6 Naxals were arrested by the security forces in the Bastar region of Chhattisgarh on Friday. 2 of them had crash boards on their heads. The arrested Naxals have been charged for abducting officials, attacking police officers, among other offences. On to our special report. India is facing a shortage of nearly 2 crore housing units needed by the rural and urban poor. Now, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana aims to address this shortfall. The scheme is part of the NDA government's flagship Housing for All by 2022 initiative, and under it, the government envisages building affordable Pakka houses with water facilities, sanitation and electricity supply round the clock. The government has achieved its target of 10 lakh houses by December 2017, and now it aims to construct 1 crore new houses by 31st of March 2019. Our correspondent Vipin Chauhan met with some of the beneficiaries. Take a look at this report.
प्रधानमंत्री आवास हमें घर मिला है, बहुत खुशी की बात है। अच्छा लग रहा है, अपना घर हो गया हमारा। इतना तो सोचा भी नहीं था, बहुत अच्छा हो गया।
The dream of owning a house drives most of us. Sometimes it even takes a lifetime, but only few fortunate ones are able to own it. Deepa Negi, who aspired to own a small house, 10 years ago she came to Delhi to earn her livelihood. Her husband drove taxi to make ends meet. Owning a house was a pipe dream till they came across Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. The outcome is this home, which proudly says Negi Awas. The prime objective of the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana credit-linked subsidies scheme is to help the poor population by increasing the institutional credit flow to meet their housing needs. Economically weaker section and low-income groups which are seeking for housing loans from financial institutions and banks are eligible for an interest subsidy of 6.5% for the period of 20 years or for the tenure of the loan, whichever is lower. This interest rate subsidy is credited during the initial stage of the loan to the beneficiary's loan account through the lending institute, which will lower their equated monthly installments or the EMIs from the beginning itself. Buoyed by the positive response, the government has now extended the scheme till 31st March 2019.
इसमें हम लोग दिन प्रतिदिन और हर माह हमारी प्रगति बढ़ रही है और राज्यों से एवं यूनियन टेरिटरी से बहुत अच्छी संख्या में यहाँ पे मांग फुलफिल हो रहा है। इस महीने तक हम लोगों ने 46 लाख घर स्वीकृत कर दिए हैं, जिसमें कुछ राज्य जो बहुत अच्छा परफॉर्मेंस कर रहे हैं, कुछ लेट पिकअप किए हैं। कुल मिला के करीब 46 लाख घर स्वीकृत हो चुके हैं।
Pooja is a resident of National Capital Region. She had big family which somehow adjusted in a small house. The space crunch dictated all family plans. And the lower middle class family never had enough savings to buy a bigger house. Life just went on. In 2017, the wheel churned. Deepa came across recently launched Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. After due diligence, the family went ahead and adopted the scheme. Today they have shifted to a new house which brought them peace and happiness. The scheme is a boon for economically weaker section whose annual income is less than rupees 3 lakhs and lower income group whose income is around 6 lakhs per annum. In both these categories, the beneficiaries could avail special interest of 6.5% up to the loan of rupees 6 lakh. Later on, to broad-base the scheme, it was increased to rupees 18 lakh income bracket annually.
मेरा बहुत दिनों से सपना था मेरा अपना मकान हो और उसके लिए आजकल लोन बहुत महंगे थे तो हम लेने की पॉसिबिलिटीज़ वर वेरी लेस। तो प्रधानमंत्री आवास योजना जब आई तो मैंने एक बार कोशिश किया, मैंने जानने की कोशिश की कि इसके टर्म्स क्या हैं, कैसे कोई गवर्नमेंट 2.5 लाख रुपए मेरे जैसे पब्लिक को जो कि ऑलरेडी अर्निंग है उसे क्यों सब्सिडी देगी। तो पहले मुझे विश्वास नहीं हुआ, फिर मैंने 2 महीने अप्लाई किया तो मैं तो बहुत खुश हूँ प्रधानमंत्री आवास योजना से और मेरा विश्वास है कि ये एक सक्सेसफुल योजना है और ये बहुत लंबी चलेगी।
मैं पहले रेंट पे रहता था तो अब मैंने जो है अपना प्रधानमंत्री आवास योजना के तहत अपना मकान लिया है और मुझे सब्सिडी भी मिली है इसमें।
The affordable housing sector got major boost after India regime came in. The government is trying to implement housing for all sentiment and letter and spirit.
हमने एक सपना देखा है कि जब आजादी के 75 साल हो तब हिंदुस्तान के गरीब को भी अपना घर हो।
Till 2nd April 2018, 9,121 projects were cleared under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. These projects will materialize into 46,35,663 houses after completion.
इंडिविजुअल हाउसिंग नहीं हो पा रहे थे बहुत, तो इंडिविजुअल हाउसिंग इसमें बेनिफिशियरी लिंक का जो कंपोनेंट है वो और एक कैफेटेरिया अप्रोच लेके चले हैं। आपको सब्सिडी लेके चाहिए, आप प्राइवेट सेक्टर से मकान खरीदना चाहते हैं, क्रेडिट लिंक सब्सिडी उसके लिए है। आप स्लम्स में रह रहे हैं, उसको रिहेबिलिटेट रीडेवलप करना चाहते हैं, उसकी व्यवस्था है। प्राइवेट पार्टनरशिप के साथ या स्टेट गवर्नमेंट हाउसिंग बोर्ड्स के साथ आप घर मकान बनाना चाहते हैं, एक एरिया में अपने लोगों को घर देना चाहते हैं जहाँ रहे, वहाँ पर आप मल्टी स्टोरीड अपने इमेजिनेटिव प्लानिंग करके आप उस तरह से ला सकते हैं जिसमें प्राइवेट स्ट्रक्चर्स को मिक्स कर सकते हैं, इंटीग्रेटेड बिल्डिंग्स ला सकते हैं कि कई प्रकार की बिल्डिंग की एक कॉलोनी बन जाए, एक सेटअप बन जाए।
In the words of Prime Minister Modi, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana is not an infrastructure. It's not meant to create walls or to provide land. It's a big program to fulfill the dreams and aspiration of the people. Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana is the tool through which even poorest of the poor in India and every individual can gain a house and self-respect. Vipin Chauhan's report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Let's get you all the international news now. U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis has accused China of intimidation and coercion in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, speaking in Singapore at the annual Shangri-La Dialogue, Mattis said that China is developing missiles in the disputed South China Sea to intimidate and coerce its neighbors, adding that Beijing's actions called into question its broader goals. Mattis told the summit that Beijing had deployed military hardware, including anti-ship missiles, surface-to-air missiles and electronic jammers to locations across the South China Sea. He further declared that the U.S. does not plan to abandon its role in the region. The comments by Mattis come at a time when President Donald Trump's administration is looking to balance Chinese cooperation on North Korea while dealing with Beijing's activities in the disputed sea.
Well, yet China's policy in the South China Sea stands in stark contrast to the openness of our strategy. It promotes what our strategy promotes. It calls in to question China's broader goals. The U.S. will continue to pursue a constructive, results-oriented relationship with China. Cooperation, whenever possible, will be the name of the game, and competing vigorously where we must. Of course, we recognize any sustainable Indo-Pacific order has a role for China.
And U.S. President Donald Trump on Friday confirmed that he would meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un for a historic summit in Singapore on 12th of June. Donald Trump's announcement came at the end of a 2-hour meeting in the Oval Office of the White House with North Korean envoy Kim Yong-chol. Chol had traveled from New York after 2 days of talks with the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and he had delivered a letter from the North Korean leader to President Donald Trump. And after the talks, Donald Trump expressed optimism that the relationship between Washington and Pyongyang was building and called it a positive thing. The historic meeting between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un would be the first meeting between the sitting U.S. and North Korean leaders.
We'll be meeting on June 12th in Singapore. It went very well, and I think it'll be a process. It's not, I never said it goes in one meeting. I think it's going to be a process, but the relationships are building, and that's a very positive thing. Mr. President. It'll be a beginning. I don't say, and I've never said it happens in one meeting. You're talking about years of hostility, years of problems, years of really hatred between so many different nations. But I think you're going to have a very positive result in the end, not from one meeting.
And that's all in this news bulletin. Thanks for watching.